Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today. I'd like to start off the evening by acknowledging that we are at the Surrey Art Gallery, which is situated upon the ancestral and unceded territories of the Salish people, including the Katsi, Kwantlen, and Simiamu nations. My name is Maya, or as everyone at Spice likes to call me, the baby of the station. And I've been working here for about over a year now, and it's been amazing. I've had so many awesome opportunities. I've met so many great people. But best of all, I've been able to be a part of this amazing family where I feel so included and so supported throughout this entire journey of mine. To start off this event, I'd like to welcome the one who's made this all possible, the one, the only, Shushma Dutt.
Can you see me? So when I was born, I was a little kid, right? Very little, always little. And my brother was very tall. And I would always ask Mom, why am I so short? And she would always say, what did she say? Good things come in small packages. I made that up. She never said that. In fact, if anything, they were very worried about me. I was a terrible student at school. I was so bad that my parents thought that when I passed senior Cambridge, that they would get me married. And they showed me a picture of a guy and said, if you don't pass senior Cambridge, you're marrying this person. He didn't look that great. Needless to say, I studied very hard. We went to India. I studied at Lady Shri Ram College. I got my bachelor's degree there. And then we went to England because we faced discrimination in India. We faced discrimination in India. We faced discrimination in England. And England was a place where we all thought that, Queen's Land, they will, be nice to us. But racism over there is very... it's not overt, it's right in your face. One fine day, Mom had asked me to get some tomatoes, and I went to a grocery store to pick up some tomatoes. And I just, as we did in India or in Africa, I just went to pick up the tomatoes, and the guy said, don't touch anything. How much do you need? I said, a pound of tomatoes. So he put the tomatoes in a bag, and when I brought them home, 2 of them were bad. But so we knew that either we were not appreciated here or not welcome here. But we all look the same. 2 eyes, 2 ears, nose, lips, 1 heart, 2 arms, fingers. Like, you get the point, right? We all are the same, but we all believe in different religions and different cultural backgrounds, but all of that put together makes a beautiful, inclusive, and a lovely bouquet of flowers. And I feel that today we want to start our program with an amazing performance by these artists. We are going to start with them because they are playing 4 different instruments, percussion instruments. But you will notice that when they jam together, it makes music, beautiful music. So if all of us jam together, we all will make amazing music. So inclusivity is the main theme today. These 4 musicians, please give them after I've introduced them. So Kirti Raghavan Garur, he's playing the mridangam. Can we hear the mridangam a little bit? Beautiful. Bharat Rai is on tabla. Bharatji. Desraj is on dholak. Desji. And Sodilal is on dole. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome them.
Namaste. Hi, everyone. It's an honor to be here today. This is our 9th year we are celebrating Hands Against Racism. Let me introduce myself. Oh, where to start? My name is Nutan Thakur. I moved to Canada, Vancouver in 1997 and started working with Radio Rimchim as a morning host and Spice Radio as an RJ. It was around the same time I started working with CBC and some local TV series for Shaw Multicultural Channel. This city welcomed me with opportunities and rewarded me for my deep love for the arts. Safe to say, I never looked back. I never looked back. In no time, I started to become a household name through my radio shows, thanks to my boss, Sushma Dutt, for the faith in me all those years ago. And since then, I have had the fortune of working in several national TV serials, movies, music videos with well-known names across Hollywood and Bollywood. When I'm not acting or when I'm not hosting, I like to be involved myself in the community. So much of who I am today is because of the people of this community. It's probably why I continue to MC local award shows and galas even today. Last Sunday, I was emceeing at Messi Theatre music program. Writing this speech made me recount the many opportunities I have been involved in these 26 years. And I have to say, it has brought up emotions of pride and gratitude. Today, I'm happy to announce that my upcoming Hollywood movie, Prom Pact, is releasing soon on Disney+. Thank you. Thanks so much for your time today. Really glad I get to continue sharing my art with the world. Thank you. And now I would like to introduce my guest. His name is Sundar Rajan. Sundar Rajan is an avid proponent of ancient Indian wisdom and its application to modern day life. He has a deep passion for the philosophy and practices of ancient cultures. In today's talk, Sundar Rajan will provide insights into how we can benefit from adapting cultural wisdom and how celebrations like Holi can transform our day-to-day experiences by bringing us closer as a society. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together in welcoming Sundar Rajan.
So when Sushma ji told me that there is a podium, I said, I'm not going behind a podium, because given my height, I'll be invisible. And I want to be a visible minority. Happy Holi to all of you. Thank you to Spice Radio for putting this wonderful program together, and to our honored guest, a very happy Holi. And we start off with a wonderful celebration that I remember from my childhood. This is how I remember Holi as a childhood. As a 10-year-old, you see that your entire locality is filled with color. Come Holi on the day, you're super excited like a child on Christmas morning. You actually have a free-for-all festival, and we did not ever care whose house it was. We went from neighborhood to neighborhood, collected more and more friends, sprinkling different kinds of colors. There were so many sweets. Gujia was one of my favorites. You had rasgulla and gulab jamun. For those who haven't tried it, you should try it at least once. And apart from that, Holi is a festival that celebrates spring. It is non-denominational. And on this day, enmities are forgotten. Even long, lasting enmity is forgiven, and people come together in an embrace, and new friendships are formed. So with Holi, basically, we did not care or know who the other person was. Any bystander was not left alone. We chase them, we bring them in, and once your clothes are dirtied, what do? You join the party, and it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. That's how Holi is celebrated in gusto. And so what? Why am I telling you this, and why do you care? These are the lessons I learned from Holi as a child. One is we need to celebrate each other. Human beings need an excuse to be happy. And this is something we always long for, and sometimes do not know how to. There are so many cultural silos we have built up for ourselves that we do not know how to break them. And festivals are a great way to celebrate each other, to integrate and engage wholeheartedly, and to embrace. I'll come back to the word embrace in a bit, but to embrace each other's as equal. And only when we do this can trust be built, and we start breaking those cultural silos. In reality, the silos are up here. Out there, we are pure human beings. Go to any playground, you'll see kids and your own childhood. Remember, you played with anybody. It didn't matter who it was, as long as you had fun. And even if there was any enmity or any fights, it was forgiven, forgotten. And somewhere along the lines, we've forgotten our childhood. And Holi and other festivals like Holi are a stark reminder that we let go of our adult selves and go back to our childhood. Now, I'll tell you a case in point. This is a very complex multicultural society, India, that I know of. It has about 121 languages, about 650 mother tongues, 19,000 dialects surviving, 66 scripts, and I can go on and you'll start seeing this. These are different scripts from some of the languages. Some don't look like the other. And many of my Indian counterparts here, if they start speaking in their mother tongue, believe me, I may not be able to relate to it. I'll have to ask, what does it mean, right? It's as diverse, with 1.4 billion people and growing. And speaking of clothes, from the north to the south, east to west, you go to any place, even within a province, you'll have different kinds of dresses, depending on the cultural upbringing of those families. And same thing with food and cuisine. I can go on and on. Trust me, I haven't tried many of these cuisines, and if you are a cook, Indian cuisine book is one of your delights. You can eat one dish a day and never run out of dishes in your lifetime. 2000 is just a starting of it. Look at the cultural diversity. Now, these are all people from India, from the north, from the east. One is Rajasthan, one is in Andhra Pradesh, Meghalaya. There are different dress codes, different languages, different customs. And those are the Gadi people of the Himachal Pradesh, and these are Toda from Nilgiri in south. Do they look alike? No. And this is Andaman and Nicobar, the Jarawa peoples, and the Banjara from the Rajasthan. Do they look alike? Well, at some level, we all relate as humans. And just a tidbit, the Jarawa peoples are very preserved community. They live in a time that's pre-fire invention. They don't use fire. and they live in an age that's pre-file. And on the other hand, you have mission to Mars and people who are launching and going to the moon and the Mars, so Chandrayaan and Mangalyaan. So there is a spatial diversity, there is religious diversity, there is thought diversity, linguistic diversity. How do you unite all these people as one? It's difficult. Every country has its own challenges. But at a people level, I'm not talking about politics, at a people level, we all unite with a cultural uniqueness, the mindset that beauty is skin deep. And when you cover the skin with holy, it's vibrant, it's colorful. Under that, it doesn't matter. We're human beings. Now, I'll give you a very quick understanding of the India is on the rise. It's the 5th largest GDP, or the 5th biggest GDP. And Angus Maddison had done a research counting 2,000 years of GDP in the world. And for the first 1,500 years, India was at 35% of the world GDP, China at second at about 26, 27%. Now, the beauty of it is they did not grow by themselves. There was a whole bunch of trade between the two countries, and there was a cultural interchange building up the economic, cultural, and traditional values. So seeing that, I learned that all of you are business people or administrators. We as a society cannot grow by alienating each other. We can only grow by embracing each other. The more we embrace, the more we learn from each other. The more we learn from each other, we grow as one in the same direction. Now, we were talking about racism. I personally believe that racism is a misnomer. Xenophobia exists. Insecurity exists. Immaturity exists. Unfortunate that we have chosen to focus on the skin color. Had we focused on hair color, it will be hairism. Had we focused on something else, it will be. But the problem is, there is one driver. Diversity is nature's way of saying, we are different. Otherwise, we'll all be amoebas sitting and raising our hands against amoebaism. Right? But we as humans have to outgrow our silos, break them, and they are purely human constructs. Good news, what has been made can also be broken. So let us celebrate one another, bring our communities together, break our cultural silos, celebrate, embrace, and engage so that we can grow together as one community. Happy Holi to all of you.
Dhanyavad Sundarajanji. That was such an entertaining and insightful presentation. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is so wonderful to be amongst the finest, diverse personalities who have come together this afternoon to show their support for the fight against racism. I'm Natasha Mendes, host and producer of the Morning Breakfast Show. The Morning Buzz, it's our fun and informative drive time show at 8 in the morning. Well, that was my show plug. When I decided to call Canada home about 5 years ago, I looked for avenues for my creativity, where my unique brownness and my eclectic confluence of cultural experiences from around the globe, having worked in global world cities like Mumbai, Dubai, Hong Kong, and now Vancouver, would find a platform. That search drew me towards Sushma Dutt and the ethos that Spice Radio and Radio Rimchim stand for. We stand for inclusivity, we stand for diversity, and we stand for being a responsible platform of information and entertainment. With a spotlight on racism today, I stand here wearing the most representative traditional clothing of the Indian subcontinent, a sari, a draped cloth which finds its mentions in the holy books, the Rig Vedas, about 3000 BC, yeah, that far ago. Our goddesses also wear it, you know. Now, when last week my daughter, who is in grade 12, suggested a culture week to a teacher, her teacher turned down the suggestion, saying that wearing a sari would be an inappropriate attire to wear to the school for the culture week because it shows the midriff. So whether it is wearing a hijab, a turban, the Palestinian scarf, the keffiyeh, or a sari, I believe ethnocentrism needs to be replaced with cultural relativism, where we don't judge other cultures based on what is right or wrong, strange or normal to us, but instead we sensitize and educate ourselves about other cultures and their practices in their cultural context. So while we are on a path of an evolving understanding of what racism is, we still have a long road ahead of us. And as a voice on radio, I hope to play a small part in the bigger story as we move ahead as a nation that truly celebrates the diverse culture and the multi-ethnic people that make this beautiful country that it is. And today I feel a sense of great pride as we present our campaign Hands Against Racism in its 9th glorious year. And to celebrate this, let's bring out the dole and energy that is infectious. And I'm telling you, you've been warned. So give it up for Jasmine, Preet, Tanveer, and Pavit from the Langley Folk Arts Club. It's Ballet Ballet time.
ਕੌਮ ਵੱਲ ਅੱਖ ਚੱਕੇ ਜਦ ਗਏ ਸੰਗ ਦਾ ਜੇ ਉਹਦੀ ਹਿੱਕ ਉੱਤੇ ਰੱਖ ਪੈ ਦੇਸ ਕੌਮ ਵੱਲ ਅੱਖ ਚੱਕੇ ਜਦ ਗਏ ਸੰਗ ਦਾ ਜੇ ਉਹਦੀ ਹਿੱਕ ਉੱਤੇ ਰੱਖ ਪੈ ਭਾਜੀ ਕਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਕੱਤੀ ਢੋਲ ਪਾਵੇ ਭਾਜੀ ਕਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਕੱਤੀ ਢੋਲ ਪਾਵੇ ਮਾਂ ਦੇ ਪੁੱਤ ਸ਼ੇਰ ਗੱਭਰੂ ਨੱਚ ਨੱਚ ਕੇ ਦਵਾਲਾ ਪਾਵੇ ਮਾਂ ਦੇ ਪੁੱਤ ਸ਼ੇਰ ਗੱਭਰੂ ਨੱਚ ਨੱਚ ਕੇ ਦਵਾਲਾ ਪਾਵੇ ਮਾਂ ਦੇ ਪੁੱਤ ਸ਼ੇਰ ਗੱਭਰੂ
ਕੱਚਾ ਮਾਸ ਪਾੜ ਕੇ ਜਵਾਨ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਜੋ ਬੀਹੜਾ ਦੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਉਹ ਹਰਿਆਈ ਜੱਟ ਦਾ ਮਿੱਠ ਕੀ ਕਮਾਈ ਨਹੀਂ ਮੈਂ ਥੋੜੇ ਟਾਈਮ ਲਈ ਟਾਈਮ ਮੇਰਾ ਗਿਆ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਡਾਉਣ ਲੱਗ
We be running them out and never make it.
Jealousy ji kardiyan mere te jo sardiya tere naal photowa karaun jo
Baby boy, you got me.
Good afternoon. I'm Meriahza Khan. I've been working for Spice Radio for over a year. I'm the news and traffic reporter and a co-host on The Morning Buzz. Being a part of Spice Radio has allowed me to express my thoughts and feelings on air, and the best part is I'm able to be myself. I'm grateful Sushma Ji has given me the opportunity and the platform to connect within our community while being relatable with our listeners and supporters. I chose broadcasting as a career because it's been a passion of mine to interact and hear other people's stories and to be a voice for those who feel they can't speak up. I want people's voices to be heard and not brushed off because you matter. So don't ever feel like you don't. Your voice is important. This is why Hands Against Racism is vital and important to me. As someone from a diverse and mixed background, I felt the looks of others when I would be out with my parents. Because for one, my dad is Fijian and my mother is Hispanic. One is darker skinned and the other is light skinned. I want to live in a world with more humanity and less judgment to expand our horizons and see beyond race. At the end of the day, you need to use your voice and speak up for what is right. I would like to now invite Miss Annie Ohana, educator from LA Matheson Secondary School, to introduce our next speaker. Annie Ohana is a proud public school educator and Indigenous department head at LA Matheson Secondary in Surrey, BC. She's an anti-oppression curriculum specialist and devoted community activist. Annie founded and directs Mustang Justice, an anti-oppression and justice-oriented youth service leadership group. Annie Ohana.
All right. Ooh, that's bright. Okay. So I do have to apologize. So I just coming from downtown Vancouver. The BCTF, the BC Federation, has our AGM. It's day 2, and so I just rushed over during my lunch break, and I have to rush back. So, but I'm still wearing a very important shirt, as I always do. And just the amazing speakers before us really prove the point of just how much work there needs to be done. I'm a proud educator. And I can't speak for that other educator. I hope maybe I can talk to them one day about what is wrong with what they said about midriffs and whatever that was about. We have a lot of work to do. And in my classroom, when Shushma, amazing, asked me, do you have a student who can speak? I'm blessed to have many. And it's because we share experiences. I want students to feel empowered, to feel in their intersectional realities, different ways that they can fight for their rights, fight for other rights. I'm a white passing person myself. I have a lot of different identities that I have to constantly fight for in my own life. And we have to role model that for our kids, that there are endless ways and positive ways to bring that change. So last semester, my social justice 12 students, Simran Mahant was such a superstar. And I think what really indicates a good student for me is not the grades, although she did great. It's not necessarily raising your hands, although she did great. It's more about really the thought process, the willingness to engage, the willingness to reflect and to think. And that can represent itself in any way, shape, or form. It's not just about the high achievers or that every student has to look a certain way. So when I was asked, Simran's name popped into my head right away, and I'm so honored that she said yes, and I'm so excited for you to hear from her. And final point, that our youth are not the future. Our youth are today. Our youth are changing things now, and that's really the most exciting part of my job, is that I get to work with people that want change now. They are working on change now, and they don't worry so much about the other concerns that adults tend to get in their way and rely on us thinking about, well, as long as we have some equality. No. It's equality and freedoms. So Simran, if you want to come up and fill in the rest.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Simran. Firstly, I would like to recognize and acknowledge that we are on the unceded traditional territory of the Coast Salish peoples. Now let me tell you a story about my 12-year-old self. Walking through the toy aisles of Walmart, careless of my surroundings, I accidentally bumped into a middle-aged woman. Now, before I had the chance to apologize to her, she had already turned around with a raging facial expression and then proceeded to say the words that would stick with me for the rest of my life. She had turned around and called me a dirty Indian who should go back to my filthy country. It may have just been a microaggression that woman had said to me, but for me, even at that age, I was deeply affected by those words. I didn't want to be known as Indian or brown anymore, because her words made me think that I was less than her somehow, and that what she was saying was right. Though the sad reality is that millions of BIPOC people face this prejudice discrimination against them every single day. So what can we do as a society to avoid this discrimination? I asked myself this question: what does it mean to have your hands against racism? When I think of this, it reminds me of a quote said by Angela Davis. In a racist society, it is not enough to be anti-racist, to be non-racist. We must be anti-racist. So what I say to you is, it is not enough to say I'm not racist, and it is not enough to say you're against racism. We need to start making progressive changes in our society to be anti-racist. Even if everyone in this room was to make a small change, like calling out racism when you see it, it would make a big impact to the overall picture of preventing racism. One thing I realized while making this speech is that when you just take a little bit of your time to reflect upon this issue of racism, you realize that there is so much more racism in your life alone. It may be the underlying racist jokes we make or hear, the stereotypes we make fun of, how we speak about others, or the way we press our opinionated beliefs on our younger generations. Personally, what I recognized the most was the amount of racist terms I hear at school and how normalized it has become to hear these words thrown around. Though school is supposed to be an open and free space for everyone, when we talk in this derogatory way, it becomes a fearful place. We have been so influenced by these terms now that teens my age think it's a new cool thing to say. We need to start educating children at schools the effects these terms have on people before it's too late. So what I ask for you all to do before we leave through these doors today would be to start making progressive changes on this social issue we face as a society. Thank you all for listening.
Mic comes down again. Respected guests, ladies and gentlemen, we've got some very important people with us. All of you are important. We have some politicians as well. And it is my great pleasure to now request the mayor of our city, Surrey, to come and say a few words. I've known Mayor Brenda Locke for a long time. And a couple of years ago, when we interviewed her for Women in Focus, I just called her Brenda Locke. And the other day when I invited her for the function, I had to say, Your Worship, would you please come? Your Worship, Mayor Brenda Locke.
Yeah, well, I'm still Brenda, everybody. I first of all really want to thank Sushma and Spice Radio for holding this event in Surrey. You could have held this anywhere in Metro Vancouver, and I'm so glad that you've chosen Surrey. We are a diverse community, and we're very proud of that. I also want to also recognize the grace of First Nations people. The land we are on, the Semiahmoo, Katzie, and Kwantlen First Nations, we thank them every day for allowing us to work and live and play in this great city of Surrey. You know, I got a whole bunch of stuff written for me, but I thought I would just make a couple of comments first. A couple of years ago, I think it was, Gurpreet asked me to come on his radio to talk about Bill 21 because I had introduced a notion at council, what's called a notice of motion, and it did pass, that we denounce Bill 21 in Quebec. And I think that was an important, But during that conversation, and Gurpreet he's a bit of a digger. He's a bit of a digger. So he was asking me about some of the reasons why. And you know what? When we were talking, I kind of recognized one of the reasons that I was so offended by that bill was because it was talking about the cross, and I'm a Christian. So it was about me all of a sudden. It changed a dial big time for me in my head and my heart. And so, Gurpreet, I thank you every day for that, because I think about that interview, and it meant a lot to me. Meant a lot to me personally, and who I am and how I see things in a different way. But then and Gurpreet reminded me of this as well. Then later on, I said, I want Surrey to explore and look about what we are doing as a city. So another notice of motion, which used to irritate the heck out of the former mayor, but I did it mostly for good reasons and for bad. And I introduced another motion that said that we should explore what are racism and biases in the city of Surrey and our institutions. And I was told we don't need to do that because we get lots of awards for diversity in the city of Surrey. To which I said, so we, a white person, is asking another white person to give us an award to say we're good. Well, I got that right. Yeah, pretty much that was it. And it really puts that right in the forefront of what you're doing, because the reality is all the awards in the world don't matter. It's what, I'm sorry I forgot the young woman's name that just spoke. It's about those kind of incredibly just horrible incidents for a child to have to deal with in their life, and that should never be. We are better than that in Surrey. I want to believe that, but apparently we're not. So that means we have a lot of work to do. Everybody in this city, every single individual in this city matters to me a lot, and we have to do a much better job. You know, I don't think I could be at a more special event to honor the former Premier John Horgan. For me, this is an honor, and to get to sit beside him is a special honor. So I thank you for the seating arrangement too, Shrishma. That was pretty cool. But thank you. It's great to chat with you, John, and I appreciate that a lot. I think, you know, we are in challenging times. I think COVID took a round out of all of us. I think we all have to figure out how we can all do this better, and Annie is a great role model for us in Surrey, and helps a lot in pointing out where we're weak, and we will do better, and we must do better. When the Hands Against Racism campaign first began, it was focused on acceptance and inclusivity. And the times have become so much more turbulent. It is more important, I think, now than ever before that we really do start to focus on what matters, and that is about how we are all individuals. We are all part of the human race, and humanity has to be our first order of business. So with that, I want to say that in Surrey we will do better. Shrishma, keep us on track. I know Gurpreet will. So I really do appreciate the honor of speaking here at this event and being amongst all you really amazing people. And John, you have always been a friend to us in Surrey and to our citizens, and I want to thank you for all that you have done for Surrey, for this region, and for our province. It has been enormous, and your steady hand all through that has guided us through a global pandemic with a really keen eye on protecting the health and economic welfare of British Columbia. So I really do thank and appreciate everything you've done. So thank you. Thank you all. Have a really wonderful afternoon, everybody. It's been amazing so far. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mankiran, and I am the host and producer of The Morning Buzz. I am so happy to be here and actually see faces. What I appreciate about Spice Radio is we have the freedom to talk about different types of stories, whether that's current events or something personal. For instance, my name, Mankiran, is a unique one, and oftentimes people struggle to say my name. In fact, when I decided I wanted to be in the media, I was told to change my name to make it easier for people. Part of our Hands Against Racism campaign is talking about challenges like this. Why can't we accept unique names? How come we have a hard time telling people to pronounce our names properly or feel pressured to anglicize our names? There was a study done a while back that found Canadian job seekers with Asian names are 20 to 40% less likely to receive a callback. This is something that I want to change, and this campaign allows us to keep conversations like this going, telling stories that can hopefully help make the world accepting of all kinds of names. Storytelling is about making a change. Speaking of stories that create change and start conversations, up next we have Charlie Smith, who I consider to be one of the smartest people I know. He's a journalist who has played such an important part in our media landscape in the Lower Mainland. Every Friday, Charlie joins us on The Morning Buzz, and we talk about a range of topics from federal politics, Harry and Meghan, to the latest Bollywood movie. We can pretty much talk about anything, which is what I appreciate about Charlie, his widespread knowledge. If I could just have 10% of Charlie's knowledge, that would be incredible. Also, Charlie has always been passionate about telling stories from marginalized communities and supporting the local arts community. His recent venture, Vancouver, focuses on sharing stories about Metro Vancouver artists with the world. For the first time, this type of cultural coverage is being offered in English and different languages on the same website. It's no surprise that he was a past recipient of the Spice Radio Hands Against Racism campaign, and I now invite Charlie Smith to the podium.
Thanks for that nice introduction, Mankiran. And I just want to mention one thing about John Horgan. It's hard not to say Premier Horgan. We have a very diverse cabinet with lots of young dynamos, and I think John Horgan is responsible for that. So I think we should always keep that in mind. He's done a lot in terms of making BC a far more inclusive province. I've seen it with my own eyes, and we'll probably hear more about it later. But just the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the first government in Canada to enshrine this in legislation. So I just want to thank you for that, Mr. Horgan. But I'd also like to offer credit to Spice Radio and Sushmaji for their tremendous work in inclusivity. When some friends and I at the Society of We Are Canadians Too started our new media outlet, Spice Radio's example of inclusivity inspired me. We wanted to have different communities speaking to one another rather than existing in silos. Let's share our stories, raise our collaborative cultural IQ. This has been Sushmaji's life's work, and it has offered so many benefits to BC. And she's also inspired generations to follow her example, as we've seen up here, including me, although I'm close to Sushma in age. But one of those is Naveen Gurn, who used to co-host a Spice Radio show with Gurpreet Singh, who's here. And Naveen later worked closely with Mayor Gregor Robertson to help make Vancouver more inclusive. And then he did the same when John Horgan brought him on to help him do community outreach. And Gurpreet Singh is, another beneficiary of Sushmaji's tutelage. Started the South Asian Arts Society, puts on the Monsoon Festival. He's also Hockey Night in Canada and Punjabi broadcaster. But those two are not alone in this regard. There's another former morning host is Safia Purani, and she's at Global now, and she recently won an RTNDA award. There are many others who are kind of these beacons of inclusion who came out of Spice Radio, Radio Rim Jim. Theo Lam, many accomplishments to her name. She was a director of Man City. She writes about environmental issues nationally. Angelina Rai at Virgin Radio. Sheena Sandhu at the Demand Generation Director. Callum Ing of the Good Karma Company. Trevor McManus, who's Director of Communications at Prospera. Ranil Desai at CTV Sports. There's so many people who've come out of Spice Radio. And so right now I'm just going to do something a little different. I'm going to ask everyone who works at Spice Radio or who formerly worked at Spice Radio or Radio Rim Jim to stand up. Can you all stand up? Okay. Now you've already done it. Let's give them a round of applause for their contributions for building a more caring and inclusive province, because that's what you've done. And I hope, Sushma-ji, you can take pride in this legacy that you've given us. You may be small in stature, but you've left an enormous footprint on our country, on our province. And for that, I want to offer my greatest deep appreciation and the appreciation of all the staff at Vancouver. You're smart, you're kind, you're community-minded, and we've been very lucky to have you in BC for so long. So thank you. Okay, next speaker.
Hello, everyone. I'm not going to introduce myself for a couple of reasons. First is that I believe in economy of words and time. Secondly, everyone knows me. For both good and bad reasons. So I'm here to shed light on the past recipients of Hands Against Racism Award. And I'm delighted to see Mr. Horgan sitting here, who is going to be this year's recipient. And that is going to be an iconic moment. I cannot wait enough. So as you know that we started our journey in 2015, but our first Hands Against Racism Award was given out in 2016. And that award went to Baltej Singh Tillo, the first RCMP officer. First Turban Sikh to be hired by the RCMP. He was a trailblazer, he made a history, but that was very challenging. And he faced a lot of racist backlash from both within and outside the force. And this was partly because we didn't have politicians like Mr. Horgan around that time. 2017, we honored Sunera Thobani, who is a UBC scholar, very strong voice against Islamophobia. She questioned the US policies in the wake of 9/11 and faced a lot of racism. So Sushma-ji decided that in 2017 that this award should go to Sunera. And the reason was she wanted to send a very strong message to Donald Trump across the border. Because at that time, anti-Muslim hatred had really grown under him. So Mr. Horgan, you were lucky. Sushma-ji is not kind to all the politicians. So you are in her good books. In 2018, we honored two wonderful individuals. Charlie Smith, we just heard him. He's also my mentor. And Alan Dutton, an anti-racism educator and activist. Now, it was very important to recognize the work these two individuals have done. In spite of their white privilege, they stood up for the minorities, they challenged white supremacy, and they took a lot of heat. It's very important to amplify those kind of stories because those stories give us hope. In 2019, we honored Cecilia Point, who is an indigenous activist from the Musqueam Band, a very strong ally of South Asian community. And also Nikki Sharma, who is currently the Attorney General, for her anti-racism work. And in 2020, we honored Harsha Walia, a famous author and an activist. I call her my comrade sister because she has a lot of influence on me. Although I know she is not liked very much by people in Victoria and Ottawa. But that's what Harsha is. And also the same year we honored Kal Dosanjh, the police officer turned community activist who tries to keep the youngsters away from violence and racism through his good work. We'll be hearing from him in a while. 2021, we had an opportunity to honor Kamika Williams, an anti-black racism educator and activist. She was instrumental behind Black Excellence Day, which coincides with the birth anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr. And same year, we honored Tammy who had spearheaded a campaign against the controversial and racist headlines calling COVID-19 as China virus. In 2022, we honored Annie Ohana. We just heard from her. She's my hero. And she, despite being a Jewish woman, this is something very amazing about her. Despite being a Jewish woman, she always stands up for people of Palestine. And that needs a lot of courage. And Jennifer Sheriff was the second recipient the same year, who is an indigenous educator. And she had designed the orange shirt pins in recognition of the Orange Shirt Day. And now it's time to pass on the baton to Mr. John Horgan this year. So that was a brief information about all these individuals. Now I just want to mention one thing very clearly. I want to thank these beautiful people for accepting our small token of love and respect. Because it's you who has done a favor to us by accepting this. It's not the other way around. This has restored our confidence in the kind of work we are doing. I would like to call upon Mr. Mel Chaudhary of Simpson, Thomas and Associates law firm to come and introduce our next guest. Mel Chaudhary and Simpson, Thomas and Associates are Spice Radio's valuable clients who give their time to educate and enlighten our audience through our programs about family laws. Mel Chaudhary.
Thank you all. So my name is Mel Chaudhary. I'm a partner at a law firm called Simpson, Thomas and Associates, and we're really happy to be given the opportunity to play a small part and be a sponsor for this event. Anytime I come across Shushma, I spent a little bit of time with her, I always feel like I'm a bit of a better person. And today is no different, not just from her, but just listening to all of you. So why is it important for our firm to be involved? It kind of goes back to our relationship with Shushma for many years, well before I became a lawyer. So our firm was started by one of the founders, Bernie Simpson. He's a Jewish white guy. And the reason I point that out is back in the 70s, when the legal community maybe wasn't as open and diverse, it was difficult for people of minorities to be involved in the legal system in terms of becoming a lawyer like me, even less judges, and even just getting help and representation. So Bernie took it upon himself to be the opposite of that. And he actually catered to ethnic minorities, including the South Asian community. So and since then, we've built a relationship with different leaders in the ethnic communities, and that's with Shushma. So Shushma, thank you. Spice Radio, thank you for allowing us to be a part of this today. Now, I'm here to introduce a very special person, the next speaker to you. With over 23 years of law enforcement experience, Kal Dosanjh has worked in one of the most challenging environments in North America in Vancouver downtown East Side. He is currently a detective in the Financial Crime Unit. Kal's continued service has led him to focus on providing youth with constructive outlets through sports with the Kids Play Foundation. He is the CEO of Kids Play Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to keeping youth away from a lifestyle of drugs, gangs, and crime. Under his leadership, Kids Play has over 500 volunteers, and over 70,000 youth participants have taken part in its program since its inception. It gives me great pleasure to introduce this dynamic person to you. Honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Kal Dosanjh.
Good afternoon, everybody. As introduced, my name is Kal Dosanjh. What a remarkable honor to be standing here in front of such remarkable leaders. Thank you so much to Spice Radio for bestowing me with this remarkable honor. All of you are leaders in your own way. However, there's two individuals in particular within the audience today that have had a remarkable impact on me. And that's John Horgan, and that's Sushma Ji. Growing up watching Sushma Ji and hearing her on the radio had a tremendous impact on me to see a woman of visible minority ethnic demographic that represented so strongly and was a source of inspiration for so many others. And to John Horgan, John, I was mentioning to him outside that regardless of where we stand on the political spectrum, it's always important to appreciate and recognize an individual that has the most sincerest and genuine intentions for the public. And John, thank you for your leadership over the years. I'm truly grateful. And to Mayor Brenda Locke, thank you very much for joining us today as well. In terms of racism, there's one story in particular that stands out over the years, and I'll share that with you today. I won't keep it long. Growing up in the 80s was tremendously tumultuous. It was rocky. I experienced a remarkable amount of racism. And there was a lot of incidents which involved altercations, hostilities, confrontations. I dealt with it in my own way. And for the most part, I was able to diffuse most of the situations, but not all of them. Because you see, I was overtly a Sikh. I had all the symbolism of a Sikh. I had a turban, a beard. I grew up in a very strong, traditional Sikh family. And I was proud of that. Listening to all the stories growing up of the sacrifices that have been made by the Gurus in standing up for the weak, the oppressed, the poor, standing up for others that couldn't stand up for themselves, and being a voice for others that were voiceless. That was always important to me and deeply entrenched into my value system. From a very young age, I knew I would be going into law enforcement. I was volunteering at the North Delta Community Policing Center, and it was a volunteer appreciation banquet dinner. And I remember sitting there at my table with the other volunteers, and the entire night, there was an elderly white gentleman that kept staring at me from another table. And I just had a bad feeling about it. I just thought he's probably going to make some type of racial remark throughout the night, and I'll just have to accept it and move on. And at one point in time, at the night, as the proceedings were coming to an end, my table got up and went for dessert. They asked me. I was good. So I sat at my table and I was sitting alone. It was at that moment that that elderly gentleman took his opportunity. He was in his late 80s, 90s, with the use of his cane and propping himself against other chairs and tables, he made his way to my table. He sat down, grabbed my hand, and something remarkable happened. He started to cry. And then he shared the following. He said during World War II, he was part of a radio contingent that was sent by the British Army to Burma because the Japanese were coming through. And he was just a young kid. He didn't have any proper training. He had just been given training on the radio and told to send signals back to the British forces should a Japanese expedition force come through. A battalion of Sikhs had been sent to protect that radio contingent. He said, I never met them. They arrived through the quiet of the night, and they stood there to protect us. The Japanese did come. There was a full-out firefight. Many Sikhs were killed. Many Japanese were killed, but the Japanese retreated. And the next day, the Sikh dealt ceremoniously with their dead, and they left, with the radio contingents and the Sikhs never having spoken a word to one another. He said, since that time till now, I've thought about it many, many times because today I sit with my family and my grandkids because of them. He said, I never got a chance to thank them then. I want to thank you now. And I'll tell you, those words resonated with me, and they have ever since. Because the legacies that get left behind sometimes are not of our own, but the legacies we have to honor of those that have fallen before us. But not only that, that all of our paths, regardless of caste, creed, ethnicity, religion, or gender, will intersect at some point in time. And we have to recognize that, and we have to respect that. At the end of the day, it's love and respect for one another that's going to get us through. And this event recognizes that. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sudhir Datta, and I am the Vice President of IT Media Broadcasting and General Manager for Spice Radio. When we conceived the idea for Spice Radio in 1200 AM, it's always been about being a bridge between the South Asian community and the mainstream community. We talk about Bollywood and Hollywood sometimes in the same breath. We talk about events around town, like the Vaisakhi Parade, Vancouver Celebrates Diwali, the Dragon Boat Festival, Dine Out Vancouver, all of it. Our goal is to encourage people of the South Asian community to get out there, to experience everything Vancouver has to offer and mix with Canadians from all kinds of different backgrounds. Having been born and raised here, I've experienced racism, some overt, some covert. Our company, by just being ethnic in nature, has also experienced discrimination. One case in point, just this last year, we had an issue with the CRTC, the Canadian Radio, Television, Telecommunications Commission. During an audit, a CRTC staff member informed us that one of our shows was not ethnic enough. There was too much English. The show was way too mainstream in nature because of interviews and so on. Basically, we were being told to stay in our lane, to only speak in our language and only tackle topics pertinent to the South Asian community. Of course, things that affect the larger Canadian community also affect us, but that's a story for another time. Now, getting mad at the CRTC staff member makes no sense. They are just doing their job and following the rules. But that's the issue. It's the rules. The rules put in place to protect us can, in some case, prevent us from being more than just visible minorities. We know that attitude is important, intent is important, education is important. Part of having an event like this is to think about how we can move forward as a cohesive nation and to celebrate and thank the people tackling what's often a difficult and nuanced undertaking. How do we get to a point where we're not Chinese Canadian or Filipino Canadian or Indo Canadian and we're just all Canadian? We also want to honor the backgrounds and cultures that have made Canada so distinct. I hope that one day we will get there, and judging by the support and all those who are here today, I believe you do too. Now it's time for me to introduce our next speaker and presenter, someone very close to Spice Radio. By education, Rachna Singh is a psychologist and worked as a drug and alcohol counselor in Alberta. She became very active in her local labor union and soon became the national representative for the Canadian Union of Public Employees. She entered into politics when Green Timbers MLA Sue Hamill decided not to seek re-election. She put her name for the nomination and was acclaimed as the NDP candidate and went on to win the seat. She was appointed Parliamentary Secretary for Anti-Racism Initiatives by Premier John Horgan in 2020. This last December, she was named Minister of Education and Childcare by Premier David Eby. Please put your hands together and give Minister Rachna Singh a warm welcome.
Thank you so much, Sudhir. Thank you so much for these kind words. It is such an honor to be here, and especially listening to all the wonderful speakers and talking about issues that are really, really close to my heart, and I'm extremely passionate about. And today, Sushma ji asked me to speak about the person who's had a lot of influence in my life. You have already heard his name a number of times. He's the recipient of this year's Hands Against Racism Award, and I'm talking about our former Premier, a very dear friend, John Horgan. And before we have John over here, I just want to say a few things about John. As Sudhir mentioned, I was nominated for Surrey Green Timbers in 2017. I was very, very politically inclined, but never thinking, even in my, not maybe unconscious level, but never at the conscious level to run for an office. And I later realized that this is something that a lot of women, they are very skeptical of putting their name for office. And especially this is even more significant for women of color, immigrant women of color. And when I was approached by the party and I had my meeting with the then leader of NDP, who was soon going to be the next premier of British Columbia. And I told him, like, I don't know, I'm not sure whether I'll be able to do it. And the faith that this man put in me, his conversation, I still remember that day, John. We met in Harrison Hot Springs during QP's think tank. It was a sunny day in August. It was 2016 August. And he said, Rachna, you can do it. And those words still resonate in my mind. Whenever I'm challenged, whenever I feel that I'm not able to do something, I think about you, John, and I think of those words. And rest we know is history. Obviously, I got elected in 2017, but that was also the year that NDP formed the government after a gap of 16 years. And that was because of John's leadership. He became the Premier of British Columbia. And at that time, I could see in him the strong allyship that he was bringing. He was very conscious of his white privilege. But whenever I think about racism and when I talk about anti-racism, I always feel that, yes, as people of color, as BIPOC community, Indigenous, Black, and people of color, obviously, we are always very passionate talking about racism and finding out way how to create just and equal society. But this work is not possible if we don't have strong allies. We have already heard from very, very strong allies. We heard from Charlie Smith. We have heard about Alan Dutton. We have heard from Annie Ohana. And John Horgan's name, I know it would be written in history as a very, very strong ally. He was instrumental in bringing the DRIPA legislation. Charlie already talked about that. That is historic legislation, and British Columbia is the only province in Canada that has enacted that legislation. But in 2020, another thing that John he was a strong advocate for was creating a profile for anti-racism. And anti-racism, a lot of times, it's a very challenging word. Right now, we are using it so much here. It seems that it's a very common word or it's easy to do. It is not. It is very, very challenging. And even to take the name racism, a lot of people feel really scared to do that. And creating a profile, creating a portfolio, having a parliamentary secretary for anti-racism. I think that was a huge, huge thing for British Columbia. And thank you, John, for giving me the honor for being the first ever parliamentary secretary for anti-racism in British Columbia. And also, one of the biggest mandates that he gave me was to have a legislation, anti-racism data legislation. And we have heard the stories about the racism that still exists in British Columbia, in Canada, within our systems. And that legislation, I think, was one of the most important legislations that we brought in 2022 under the leadership of John Horgan, and now the present Premier, David Eby. And that legislation will will expose the barriers and the gaps that the communities face, especially when they are seeking out the services that are so important to them. We have heard from this young student, he talked about your experience with racism, and you have talked about the racism that you are still facing in the schools. And it just breaks my heart, not just as an education minister, but as a parent whose children go to the school systems, and they face these kind of microaggressions in our school environment. And that's what we, as the government, are committed to do. And we couldn't have taken those bold tasks without the leadership of former Premier and my very, very dear friend, John Horgan. So John, I can go on and on, but thank you so much for your allyship. Thank you so much for your strength. Thank you for what you have done for British Columbia and personally for me. Thank you so much. And now to present this award, I would like to invite Arran and Ratana Stephens. And just a few words about them. I have known them for last few years. They are the co-founders of Nature's Path. It used to be known as breakfast cereals before. They have more than 150 products. But one great thing about this Nature's Path is that is proudly British Columbian. Ratana and Arran, please come.
Good afternoon, everybody. Sitting at the audience, I was filled with deep emotions. First was deep appreciation for Sushma ji, a woman, an Indian woman, a woman of color, has done wonders. My hats off to you, our hats off to you, Sushma. When Sushma asked me, would you like to come to present an award? I could not say no. Because the recipient is my favorite person. And awardee is also my favorite person and favorite organization. I will tell you, when I was 9 months pregnant with our first child, Shanti, in 1970, at St. Paul's Hospital, I was approached by a man with a very angry, white, red face. He says to me, Arran went and wanted to park the car. He yelled at me and said, why don't you go back to Pakistan, you Paki? I had tears in my eyes. I was devastated. When I married Arran in 1969, my family was ostracized by their relatives. My mother-in-law was very generous. However, she said to Arran, so Arran, what's going to happen to your children? We said, Mom, what are you talking? No, they are going to be colored. And he said, Mom, don't worry about my children. They are going to be what they want to be. That's immediately shut her off. Standing here, Margaret Mead comes to my mind. She said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever had. So here I'm seeing a miracle that few of us, on top of us, John Horgan, have decided to change the province, add to the province. Thank you. I want to acknowledge that the Surrey School District is on the shared, unceded territory, traditional territory of Ketsi, Samiamo, Kwantlen, and other Coast Salish people. I also recognize that we all live and work in different traditional indigenous territories. Today, I join everyone who are here to celebrate our friend, former Premier John Horgan. John is undoubtedly one of the Premier Office's most successful and admired occupants, particularly on the issue of race in British Columbia during his tenure. I can't see you, John, but I sense it. Former Premier John Horgan established himself as a leader with genuine interest in trying to do the right thing for people. He actively worked with people rather than against. Thank you, John. There are many, many accolades we can say, but there are few of them that I searched. Under his leadership, BC government passed the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People Act into law. It was just an act. But November 2019, it became a law. The act creates a path forward that respects and establishes the UN Declaration on this right as the province framework for reconciliation. The potential and impact of this law is monumental and will be far-reaching for many generations to come. Thank you, John. John is known for his belief that everyone has a right to live without fear of racism, discrimination, intolerance, and bigotry based on race, creed, and color. And so, in addition to the Declaration Act, he also led his government in introducing, as Rachna mentioned, Anti-Racism Data Act, which was introduced in May 2020. And it is an important step in dismantling systemic racism and discrimination. Former Premier John Horgan is also known for publicly offering full provincial support to the federal government. Federal government adopted the International Holocaust Remembrance Association of Anti-Semitism. He understands that inclusivity is a value, and he pledged to use this to be taught in school. He made sure that this definition is a non-legally binding educational tool to identify all forms of anti-racism in BC. John's vision for all British Columbians is that we celebrate and use the strength and beauty of our diversity to create a more equitable, kind, respectful, and inclusive province. BC Premier of Inclusion and our Premier Daddy, we salute you. In my opinion, in our opinion, you are a very worthy recipient of Spice Radio's annual Anti-Racism Award. It is my great pleasure to invite John on stage to accept an award and share a few words of wisdom, please.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you. Oh, it's beautiful. Okay. Thank you, Rachna, Arran, so much. Obviously, it's humbling to be here before you today, and I can't see anyone sitting up there. You're absolutely right, which is a good thing. It is an honor to be here, and Mankiran, when you're 6'2", in your 60s, white as white can be, and your name is John, I don't know if there's more privilege than that, but I appreciated your story and all of the stories we heard today. As a son of an Irish immigrant, I love to hear stories, I love to tell stories, and the honor of my life to have this job has allowed me to step into people's lives, wherever they have come from. Whether they are Indigenous peoples like the Coast Salish people whose territory we're on today, who have been here since time immemorial, or if, like Rachna and Gurpreet, you just arrived in the past 20, 25 years. The stories of British Columbia are the stories of the world, are the stories of humanity. And what a gift for me as an individual to have the opportunity to lead a government to focus on bringing people together. My wife Ellie is with me, the daughter of Dutch immigrants who fled Europe from Nazi tyranny following the World War. Telling their stories to me as I grew up hearing in their church, Brenda, about what life was like, the hardships of coming to a new land. Going to Gurdwaras to hear the stories of Sikhs and to hear Kal tell the story of the Sikh military folk who were there to protect the empire and the king at the time, while Don Cherry was on television telling them to go home. These inconsistencies speak directly to the challenges we have in our education system and why it's so critically important. And I also have to say, as an aside, Kal, you look pretty buff in that suit, but you're never going to want to wrestle with him when he's in his tracksuit, which is the first time I saw him. But I think the suit softens you. It was nice to see that. But it's through education. Racism is not something that you are born with. It is something that you learn. And anti-racism also must be something that we do our best to be born with, but we must always teach. I grew up at a time when multiculturalism versus the melting pot of the United States was something Canadians were fiercely proud of, as was I, growing up as a young man and a father and then becoming an elected representative. But as time went by, I got to learn with my friend Raj Chauhan, Harry Baines, Ginny Sims, Jagrup Brar, and many, many others, that the communities that they came from, the communities that they represented, were not like the community that I represented. They were not like Peace River North. They were not like the Kootenays. Raj reminded me that we went to a school in Edmonds in 2006 where 130 languages were spoken. That is fantastic. And a daunting challenge for educators, but what a gift to the people of British Columbia to have that representation of diversity from every corner of the globe. As we heard in the Holy story, when you're covered in color and flourish and excitement, what is underneath that is just humanity. And that humanity may speak a different language. It may practice a different faith. But if you want to learn about the impacts of Kristallnacht, the best place to find that is in a synagogue. And when you want to hear about the challenges of Muslims in the Middle East, going to a Nowruz celebration on the North Shore is a good idea. In our community are the stories of the world, the stories of our collective history. And as British Columbians, 5 million souls, we have an opportunity to make this the beacon on the hill. What the United States used to be before white supremacists and fascists took over the governments below us, that was the place the world looked to for hope. That was the place that people came from, the tired, the weary, and the weak. Now, I believe British Columbia can and should represent that. The Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People was not something that came out of my head. It was something that I learned from Grand Chief Stuart Phillip and Ed John and Terry Teegee and Sophie Pierre and the legion of Indigenous people that I had the good fortune of coming upon as a local elected representative. And after 12 miserable, interminable years in opposition, I got an opportunity to do something as premier. And to have the Speaker of the Legislature, a South Asian man, the Education Minister, a South Asian woman, the Attorney General, the top lawmaker in British Columbia, a South Asian woman. That is British Columbia. And now when British Columbians look at their elected institutions, they see themselves reflected back. Not perfectly, not completely, but better than it has ever been in our history. The NDP, if I could put on, I said to Brenda that I'm post-partisan these days, but I am still, in my core, who I am. I am who I grew up to be. My mom instilled in me the importance of standing up to bullies, and racism at its root is bullies. And I have been spending my entire life trying to protect those and give voice to those who do not have it. But what we did in the NDP was made a deliberate decision to ensure that the people that we asked to run for us, to elect, to represent their communities, looked and acted like the mainstream. So now, 50% of the people in the NDP caucus are women. Not quite the 52 that represent British Columbians, but there are more women than ever before, and that is not going to change. That is the future, not just for the NDP, but for all political parties. More South Asians, more Chinese Canadians, 3 Indigenous peoples in the legislature, Métis as well, gays, lesbians. The diversity of our legislature is starting to look like the diversity in our communities. And although I had the good fortune of being the premier when most of these things happened, it could not have happened were it not for the extraordinary and courageous people, many of whom have been recognized by Spice and Shushmaji and others for bringing us to where we are today. But what we learned from COVID-19 is that it doesn't matter the color of your skin. It doesn't matter your economic status. It does not matter where you come from. A virus affects us all equally, without discrimination. And although during the pandemic we saw so many examples of overt racism thanks to the cell phone generation that we live in, I shudder to think of how many countless other acts of racism and violence against people of color that did not get captured on a cell phone, that we did not become horrified by. The good news is that when we saw these images on global television and on other media outlets, almost to a person, British Columbians stood together and said, not here, not now, not ever again. And that is what we have to take away from today. If we are going to realize the dream that we all want British Columbia to be, we need to do it together. Men, women, people of color, white folk named John, all of us with the same goals and aspirations. Human rights. I wanted to make reference also, another shout back to my friend Raj Chauhan. We have a renewed Human Rights Commissioner in British Columbia because he would not let that go. He would not let that go. Harry Baines would not let that go. Jagrup Brar would not let that go. So when we formed government, one of the first things we did was say, if we are going to talk about human rights and inclusion and respect, we have to make sure that people have a place to go where they can have themselves validated, not by government edict, by an independent review of the way we treat each other. That's the power of the Human Rights Commission, and it has its failings. There's lots of things that need improvement. Charlie, I expect you to be writing about all of this at your earliest opportunity, because in Charlie's world, it always works out, and that's why I'm so grateful and thankful that he's here today and honored to be sharing an award with you. I had words written on a piece of paper. My staff person now is Ellie, and I haven't mentioned it to her, but my bag is somewhere in the building. It isn't here. But on it, I had many notes of people I wanted to make reference to. I wanted to make reference to Carol James, my friend and colleague, who was the leader of the BC NDP, the best premier we never had. And to my friend Adrian Dix, also, if you were going to make a health minister out of spare parts in a box, you would end up making Adrian Dix. And both of them were friends and colleagues of mine, and along with, I have to say, Mike Farnworth, who ran twice to be leader of the NDP and has been our House leader since before the dinosaurs in the legislature. All of us, in a very unique way, supported each other. When you look, as we will, and I do support Premier David Eby, most political parties eat their leaders and toss them to one side. And we decided, after 12 miserable years in opposition, that everyone had a role to play. Everyone had a contribution to make, whether they had been successful in a general election against Liberals or whether they had been unsuccessful. Adrian, Carol, myself, and Mike are solid friends who just wanted British Columbians to come together. It wasn't about us. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about Carol. It wasn't about Adrian. It wasn't about Mike. It was about British Columbians. And if I could just say to all of you, and Cal made reference to this, you may vote differently, but once the votes are cast, once the election is over, it's over, and all of us have to work together to make the world a better place. Shushma, thank you so much for inviting me today and giving me this extraordinary honor. I know that Shachi Kurl and I are going to be talking about the importance of this later on for reasons that are only known to Shachi and I, but thank you so much, and I'm glad I can't see all of you, but I'd be crying my eyes out.
Thank you, John Harganji. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Noni Kaur. By profession, I am a physiotherapist assistant and a recreation therapy assistant at New Vista Long-Term Care. I'm director of programming and host on Spice Radio's sister station, Radio Rimchim. I was a film and TV actress, producer, a writer in Mumbai. I run my own theater group and production house in Canada. I lent my voice to Bollywood, Punjabi, and international animation films. Here in Canada, you can hear my voice at Vancouver International Airport. I always welcome people in my language. Canada ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ. Yeah, and my colleagues call me from airport, I heard your voice. I said, yes. I was missing that creativity of Mumbai in Canada. My uncle, Dr. Charan Pal Gilji, introduced me to Sushma ji, and Sushma ji asked me to join Radio Rimchim the next day. Thank you, Sushma ji. I had found my Mumbai in Canada. Well, today we have gathered here for a campaign titled Raise Your Hands Against Racism. There is a need to think deeply about this issue today, not only in Canada, but in whole world. Like a virus, it is hollowing the structure of our society. To eliminate this, we have to unite. Your presence here is testifying that we will not tolerate racism under any circumstances. Martin Luther King said, in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Let's raise our hands together. In 2005, when Spice Radio got its license from CRTC, Spice Radio made a promise to always promote Shyamuk Group, their classes, and also their students' recognition work. We are very proud of our association with this world-famous performing arts institution that has spread the joy of dance to millions of South Asians all over the world. Please put your hands together to welcome Shyamuk Vancouver.
wow. That is quite the pic of me. Hi, my name is Richard Lai, as you can see by that beautifully set up projector over there with my face on it. I realize I'm one of the last speakers here, so I'm not that nervous. It's not like my nerves have been building up gradually backstage or anything. Anyway, I have been extremely blessed by Spice Radio, and I am honored to be a part of their team. They brought me on to not only produce my own show, but also help out with tons of voiceover and editing work. And occasionally, we joke about how I'm like a TOC, except instead of a teacher on call, I'm an RHOC, radio host on call, I guess. I'm always happy to help out whenever there are others who are away. I'm not of South Asian descent, but honestly, it doesn't even feel like it when I'm there. Everyone there treats me just the same as they do everyone else. I'm actually of native Taiwanese descent. And believe me, growing up, I've heard many, many things about being Taiwanese. It's very rare, but it happens. I would just like to thank Spice Radio once again for taking care of me so well. Our next speaker is widely known as the first Canadian broadcaster of South Asian descent and is a pioneer in BC's ethnic broadcasting. You know her already. Please welcome back to the stage, Shushma Dutt.
Thank you very much. As Gurpreet ji mentioned, when we started our event in 2015, we started it on the 15th of January, which happened to be Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. What an appropriate day to start our event in 2015. And this is the 9th year that we are celebrating this, and I am so happy that we were able to honor you, Mr. Horgan. We've got tons of respect for you. And there are a lot of things people will remember you by, but I think you will be remembered. I think Keith Baldry said once that you would be remembered for being the most well-loved premiers of British Columbia. It is my duty now to thank all our sponsors who've made this event possible for us. I'd like to thank Ratana and Arran Stevens of Nature's Path. Thank you so much. Simpson Thomas and Associates. Our brown sponsors are Alliance Immigrations, Mr. Rakesh Sharma, A.S. Bubber and Associates, Anita Dalakoti, who was dancing just now. Lovely dance, Anita, of Dalakoti Financial, Fraserview Meats, Minister Rachna Singh. I didn't see you dancing. My very good friend from Nana's Kitchen, Shalina Mavani, Resource Works and Stuart Muir, and State Bank of Canada, India. They were also our sponsors. Neelam couldn't be here because she was away from DiverseCity Community Services. Nafisa and Hanif from Naz's Pharmacy are here, and RCH Foundation and Hema Bhatt is representing them. I thank you very much, all of you. I would like to take this opportunity and thank Ardith and Leanne, especially Dave, Tommy, Ardith, Reena, Leanne, and Kent. Thank you very much for making this an event that we would never forget. Anyway, our event now comes to an end, but Shamak Group is going to make you all dance, and when you leave, please don't forget to pick up your bag. And as you are leaving outside, we have paint and paper to put your hand there and write a message if you would like to do it. We are not forcing anybody to do that, but it is put up in the courtyard as you go out. But there is still some food, there is still some tea. If you would like to do that, you've been sitting here for almost 2 hours, and we apologize for the program getting so long. So thank you, everyone, for being a part of our day today, and I thank you. Thank you.
आके ऊंचा साउंड बजा के रेड वाला कलर लगा के चिंगे हीरो बनकर हो जैसे शिव शंकर अजमूर है भयंकर रंग उड़ने दो हम आए बन ठक्कर के मूड है भयंकर रंग उड़ने दो Are you ready? One more time. Let's go. हो जय जय शिव शंकर अजमूर है भयंकर रंग उड़ने दो ग्राउंड में आके ऊंचा साउंड बजा के रेड वाला कलर लगा के चिंगे हीरो बनकर